Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another week at Beyond the Trailer Park. So this evening, Tracy will be with us. Her laptop decided it's doing like an extra long update, so yeah, fuck you, Windows. She'll be here as soon as that's figured out, so not to worry. But joining us as always from up in Pennsylvania. Good evening, Beth.
Howdy, howdy. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. She's been having some bandwidth issues, so hopefully that'll level out shortly. But we see you. And from the wilds of Mississippi, good evening, Miss Morgan.
Hey, how are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's actually a little bit warm today, but you know, we kind of deal.
Same.
Yeah. Isn't it always warm in Mississippi?
Yeah, it kind of is. It's just the summers are awful and humid and hot, but this summer hasn't been as hot as the others. So I think the summer is going to extend through September this year. So I'm not looking forward to that, but we'll see.
Because I know, like, down in Georgia in October, I was, like, wearing shorts and get warm. So I don't know what it's going to be. I'd imagine I'd be wearing shorts. But I was wearing shorts in Nashville in March, man. Like, it was damn warm. I was happy. It was, well, and our guest tonight understands that because she just lives down the road from me. That would be Ms. Wendy. Good evening.
Hi. Glad to be here.
And yeah, I was up in Nashville, was it two springs ago for NanoCon in March, and it was like, you know, end of May, so I was like, woohoo, it's summer, and everybody else is like got parkas and shit on. It's like, I got a kick out of that. But yeah, Wendy is the host of a fairly new podcast by the name of Women Beyond Belief, and if you've heard that name before, you might remember our friend Karen Garst, and she and Wendy kind of got together, and Wendy wanted to do a thing, and Karen said, well, hey, I got a good name for that, and so they kind of teamed up. Mm-hmm. It's pretty awesome. As you were saying on your introductory show, talking about, you know, you and what you're up to, there's not a whole lot of women out there talking about secular stuff and their journeys and whatnot. So I'm glad that there's more of us trying to get out there and get heard, because we need that.
Yep. Yes, definitely. There's definitely a lack of atheist women activists that are well known. I'm starting to find some, such as Karen, who is sort of behind the scenes, although now that she has a book out, she's becoming more public. But it's amazing how many women are there. They're just not, they're not being heard, like the Dawkins and the Harrises and the Andrews and stuff. So we just need to bring them more to the forefront.
Absolutely. And I don't know why that is. But you know, why don't women get that voice as much? It's something I always wondered about. But before we get into that, there's Miss Tracy. Hello.
Sorry.
It's okay. I had a feeling, and I did my update last night, and it took like over an hour. So
yeah, I thought 20 minutes. That's plenty. No,
Windows usually has other ideas, but anyway, and Tracy comes from us from the not so wild of Maine.
A little wild right now, but
okay. I always think of
thunderstorm
as so sort of quiet and just pretty, and you know, people just kind of do their thing, and I don't know. That's what I was like there, but
it's more or less like that.
Yeah. That's okay. Well, I think of Mississippi as wild because there's a lot of rednecks down there.
There are, yes. Tons and
I've
tons
been
of
to
rednecks.
Georgia enough times. I have a pretty good idea.
Yeah, it's like that, but even stranger.
Oh, God. No, that sounds pretty scary. But yeah, I don't know, ladies. Like, why aren't there so many of us that are vocal out there? Like, they just don't seem to get noticed. Anybody got ideas on that? Because I don't know. It just seems strange to me. Maybe it's because I'm a loudmouth and I just don't shut up. I don't know.
You mean,
Well,
why there are not more women's voices in like movement atheism?
Yeah, and secularism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's not a very welcoming space in many ways for women.
I agree.
So I think it's harder for women to, I mean, as with anything, women have to, work twice as hard and be twice as good. So I think there's some of that at work.
Okay.
And being a woman online, I think, presents a certain set of unique challenges as well.
Okay. And I've heard a lot of women that have that experience, and I don't know why, but that's not been my experience. And so I am challenged myself to kind of put my head around that, because I don't know why that is. I go where I go, I do what I do, I say what I say, and I get very little pushback about it. I don't know.
yeah, it's just,
Well, I think, like, for example, I think, and I didn't come with receipts for this conversation, but so I'm not going to be able to do citation upon citation, but
Yep.
I think some very prominent voices within movement atheism that are, say, very hostile to feminism,
Okay.
and
Yes, I agree.
who tend to care about how women are treated only if the topic is Islam. And so they don't necessarily carry that concern over to how women are treated in the West or outside of Islam. So I think for some women, and I'm a lot like you, Deb. I go where I go and I say what I say because I'm old and I don't give any fucks anymore. But I think that has a chilling effect for a lot of women.
Okay. We should look into ways to sort of mitigate that on both ends, I think, because I mean, now maybe it's just because I'm weird, but when somebody like tries to get up in my business and tell me what to say or think, that's like encouragement to me. So maybe it's just because I'm a weirdo. I don't know. I like
think
the first one. Sorry, Beth, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I think too, it depends on how you define success.
Yeah.
I mean, what's a successful woman within atheism? Well, for me, it's doing what I do.
Yeah.
I don't really give two flying fucks what Joe Schmo down the road thinks.
Yeah.
But there are some women who judge it a little bit differently, but I'm not trying to, quote, make a living off of it, so to speak.
Right.
I just do what I do as a hobby. Whereas, there's other people that
Sorry.
I think a lot of it depends on what we deem ourselves as being successful within the movement. I wish there were a much more vocal, using you as an example, Deb, because, like, I mean, you go about and do what you do, and you get out and about, where I can't do that. So
Yeah.
I think that's how we have to look at it, is how we define it first.
I suppose, like, I don't look at it as a success thing necessarily, as just, I don't know, I just don't get that type of, like, I've never been, you know, what they talk about cyberbullying and things like that. I've never had that happen, and I'm fucking mothy, man. Like, you know, like,
I've had, and again, like, usually it makes me laugh because it just shows this just abject lack of character or intelligence of any sort. But I have some pretty severe abuse that, and I'm not putting myself on a pedestal like, oh, I'm so great, I'm so tough because I can stand up to all this bullying. It's nothing compared to what some women get. But, you know, I've been called a fat cunt and a cum dumpster and a whore and a Jabba and, you know, you worthless fat cow, and, you know, I've been called all kinds of things. And, you know, there's only so much of some women can take. You know, it's one thing when it's, you know, when it's one every 1,000th comment, but when it's 1,000 comments every day or every hour, then that can be an awful lot for some women to tolerate. And I don't know if I could stand up to that.
I've never experienced it on that level. Like, I've been told all of those things, but never more than, you know, some douchebag here or there. I'm like, yeah, fuck you, buddy. Is that the best you can come up with? Like, come on, that's shit.
I think the worst I've ever gotten was, you dyke, you know, something along that line. And I'm like, and I've seen some of the comments some of the women within the movement have gotten, and I'm like, I've been blogging since 2001 now. I mean, we're going on almost 17 years now. And but it just amazes me. And it's like, well, what am I doing wrong that I'm not getting this vitriol?
So when you're just sort of getting into the fray, what's your experience been like so far?
Well, it's interesting because I was in a very fundamentalist church and background and grew up with very fundamentalist rules for 40 years. So we were taught, you know, that women, we took the Bible very, very literally, and women were supposed to be quiet in the church and quiet, and the husbands were supposed to speak up. So I was never part of a church that had female pastors. Women were not allowed to be elders or deacons or anything like that. So I come from a background that is not used to being outspoken as a woman. And this is where I think some of the hesitancy for women to come out of the closet in the atheist movement, if any of them came from a background similar to mine, we don't know that we have a voice. We don't know we're allowed to speak up. We've been told to be quiet, except for, you know, with other women's groups. We're allowed to lead women's Bible studies, but we're not allowed to lead anything involving a man. So you know, it's been very, very challenging for me to face the fact that I don't have to stay in that little bubble anymore. But when it's all you've known for 40 years, it's your, you know, it's second nature. It's second nature for me to assume that men won't listen to me, and that I don't have as much of a voice. So it's very possible that that is part of the reason why there's not as many women in the forefront in the atheist movement, if they're at all like me. So I envy any of you who left religion earlier, because it sounds like you got your voice. You weren't brainwashed, being told, yes, you've got to obey your husband, you've got to be silent. So I feel like I'm a 20-year-old starting new, you know, in that I got to learn how to assert myself. So I'm still very surprised that any men even listen to my podcast. I had because I just assume men don't want to hear me. Men don't want to hear a woman's voice because we don't matter.
That breaks my heart.
So that's,
I was taught the same thing when I was in, that evangelical boarding school, and I bought into it. So I do think that that's part of it as well. But then I remember when I became, an open atheist, I thought there was this atheist community, they're not going to be so sexist and awful. And I quickly found out that was not the case at all.
yeah, and I think it's possible that just like those of us women who were, steeped in it from day one, plus add 20 years as an adult, also living that way, teaching my daughters to be quiet, then it's very possible that the men who also have come into the atheist movement later on in life after being raised fundamentally, they are also used to talking down to women. They're used to seeing women as second class. So it goes both ways, I think, even though they, we don't want to say, oh yes, they're all sexist, but I think a lot of it's benign. I can't blame myself that I see myself as, less than a man, because that's what I was taught, and that's what the Bible taught us. So I think we also have to give the men some slack, and to realize that some of them are just coming out of a misogynistic background that they themselves didn't choose. So I want to see it for both. I don't want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater and just assume that all men are sexist and they can't change too. I think a lot of them need to change as much as we need to open our, to be more outspoken, and they need to learn that they are still acting as a misogynist.
No,
I think that's a really
I would
good
be curious.
Sorry, Beth.
I was just going to say, well, I think I'm going the same way you were going, is I really wonder if anybody's ever looked at the statistics of how many of the men and women that experience this are coming from a heavily religious background, and how that's affecting it. I think that's a good point you made.
I think it's also interesting and possibly impactful that people are, both men and women, are coming from an environment where there are very few female role models, where there are very few female role models. There is no woman equivalent of the Four Horsemen.
Yep.
There is no woman. There is no female Tim Harris. There is no female Richard Dawkins. And I'm not saying there aren't female minds out there in the atheist movement who are every bit equal to them, but they don't have that level of prominence and visibility so that other women coming up through the atheist movement have those voices as role models. So I think that there's a real absence of role models. And when you're coming from one area without them and going into another one without them, it makes it that much harder, probably. I don't have that experience because I never had religion, so I've never had to make that transition. But I would think it would be a lot harder if you didn't have, when there aren't people to emulate.
Well, and I also think that our society is still geared to, the 1940s, 1950s mentality. The women take care of the kids at home and they're homemakers. And I think a lot of us are stuck in that. There's such a huge population, quantity in the population that is that age group that has dictated our government and our laws, and so much of the way our society just keeps, continuing with that mindset. And so what happens when women are busy at home taking care of the kids? They aren't getting an education, or they aren't using the education that they might have gotten. So they aren't the ones who have the time to write the books. I think it was Karen Garst who said that she did a search on Amazon, and the top 100 atheist books, only 6 of them are written by females. So I mean, how much time do men have that women don't have that extra amount of time? It's still so much part of our society. And so the women aren't able to speak out as much if they don't actually have the time to dedicate that much time into writing the books, into speaking, into being those public figures. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm trying to write a book. I've started it 4 years ago, and I'm busy. There's so much. We have 4 kids at home, and it's just a lot of work. And I think, boy, it'd be so easy if I was the man and I could just leave the job, you know, of cleaning the house and making the food and that, which I did for 20 years in my first marriage. Thankfully, I'm out of that one. Yeah. So I didn't have any time to spend doing things, you know, that are public in terms of spreading, if I had been an atheist at that point in time. So the more we can free up, free up the society from the mentality that there's women's roles, men's roles, which is very, very much part of the fundamentalist religious group that are still very, you know, they're still populating, they're still procreating, and still creating another generation of girls who still think that their role is to get married, have kids, stay home. They're not going to be the ones, you know, that are writing the books and becoming public figures. So it's only right now, as my youngest is 18, that I'm feeling like I have a little bit more time on my hands. But other than that, my job is raising the kids, because that's what a woman does, because that's the way my mom did it, and that's the way the church tells me to do it. So I'm sort of stuck back in those a previous generation mindset. But I'm very normal. When I left religion, all of my friends, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of friends from different churches, we had 15 different churches that supported us when we were in Brazil, 350 different individuals, and every single woman that I knew also had that mindset that the man works, the woman stays home and raises their kids. You know, I knew very few.
Go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say that idea, that notion that we don't have the time is kind of a big one, because when people ask me what I do, you know, my working part-time now is a necessity, but one of the decisions I made when I got out of my last relationship, I was like, screw that, I'm staying single and doing the stuff I want to do, instead of being stuck in, even though it was a lesbian relationship, it still had that whole, you know, male-female role bullshit. I was working 2 jobs and taking care of the house and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, well, you know, now I only work part-time. The reason being, so I can do my blog, so I can do my podcast. And people are like, and they're, you know, some people are like, well, they think, I mean, I don't make a lot of money because of that, but I'm doing what I want to do. Whereas for any of the guys I know within the movement, they've taken sabbaticals from their college careers to do their books, or sabbaticals so they can take 6 months and do a speaking tour. That's unheard of with women.
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's the traditional roles that we embrace when we were part of the church, barring Tracy. We've carried those over into our secular lives because that's what society expects.
I wonder, lucky to have gotten out that early, because the sect that I had joined, they, you know, all of the women that I knew that actually had jobs, every last one of them worked in a nursing home. That was like the only approved outside of the home job that any of them could have. And the girl that I went to school with, her biggest ambition in life was to go to Bible college, find a suitable husband, and have children.
MRS degree.
Yeah, get her MRS degree at the Bible college, because why else do women go to Bible college but to get a husband, right? So, yeah, and I just remember, even when I was still believing at the time, thinking, you know, but you can do so much more. Like, you know, being a good Christian doesn't mean you have to stay home and look at kids all day, does it? And I've chosen to be child free for many of those reasons, because I didn't want to be tied to that. You know, I love everybody else's kids, but I prefer none of my own. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
remember
there's
being
certainly,
ever
you know,
given
I
a
think-
choice. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm
That's
sorry, I
it.
didn't mean to,
Go ahead,
didn't mean to
Tracy.
step on any toes, but, you know, one of the things that Beth mentioned about men taking sabbaticals or leaves of absence so they can go on a speaking tour or to write their book. Well, especially if there are children in that family, women are a whole lot less likely, for so many reasons, to take a sabbatical from work or go on a speaking tour. They're not
Yep.
going to leave their kids, I think, for reasons that are biological and societal, and, you know, because I think most, I'm going to get in trouble for saying most, but a great many women don't want to leave their young kids at home for 4 months to go on a speaking tour. And if they did, there would be no amount of abuse and blowback for that woman. You'd be a horrible woman, a horrible mother, a horrible role model. There'd be no end to the judgment that goes against a woman for leaving her children at home with dad for 4 months while she went on a global speaking tour. But if a man leaves his family for 4 months to go on a global speaking tour, that's just life.
Yep.
That's just, he's following his career, and that's just what they do. So, you know, I think there's a whole different set of expectations. And of course, women internalize that. If I had the opportunity to go on a 4-month speaking tour and leave my kid behind, there's no way I would do it. And I'm not saying that makes me a hero. I wouldn't judge another woman who does it. I just know that I wouldn't do it. And a lot of that is because I've internalized the expectations that society has placed on me as a woman, that I would be failing my child if I did that.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah, and I see also, going back to the generational thing, like about how we have these traditional roles, and people keep saying, "Oh, it's going to end. It's going to end." And I don't really see that happening, particularly in the atheist community, because what I've seen is a lot of millennial men, they become atheists. It's usually they're more drawn to the alt-right end of that. So I keep seeing a lot of that. And I'm wondering if that's having something to do with this perpetuation of these traditional roles, because they're very much into those. And yeah, I just see it. It's really discouraging. So I don't know if it's necessarily just people coming out of religion later in life, but it's also, it seems to be the ones that are coming out younger. You know, they'll go on YouTube, look up atheism, and here they see a bunch of alt-right people. So
Well, it's like we're fighting all the battles that our mothers and our grandmothers fought back in the 60s and 70s. Because
Yeah,
we've raised a couple of generations of women and men who forgot what it was like when abortion was illegal, and when contraception was illegal, and when women couldn't take the pill if they didn't have their husband's permission, and when, you know, white people couldn't marry black people because that was against the law. And so we've forgotten all of these things that we fought so hard to win. And now it's just like, well, women don't have any problems. Unless you're living in Saudi Arabia.
Like,
unless you're living in Saudi Arabia, you got no problems.
yeah.
It's okay. Okay, you got raped, but you didn't get stoned to death for getting raped. So you had it easy. And I have literally seen men make that argument to women who have been raped, who said, that sucks, but you didn't get stoned to death, so really you were lucky. So it's this whole, you know, like we've forgotten what we should have learned. We've forgotten what our parents and our grandparents learned.
But I was never taught that. You see, it's not like I forgot it. I was in such a bubble, and our fundamentalist group was in such a bubble that it was, you know, the Bible was our guidebook, and our moms, my mom especially, was very influenced by fundamentalism. And so she never introduced me to feminism or women having careers, even though this, you know, obviously the secular people in the 70s and 80s some of them were having careers, of course. but I was totally oblivious to what type of feminism was going on during that time. So it's not like I've forgotten it, or maybe other people in my situation. It's brand new to me. I did not know anything about it because we were just in our little bubble.
And that's telling, when you say, I didn't know I had a choice about having kids, right? Like
nope.
that. Yeah. You just, that's
I never had any choices. I mean, still to this day, I really don't know what I like, what I want, what my desires are, if somebody said, what's your favorite thing to do? All of those things, it was always dictated for me, or if in doubt, do God's will, raise Christian kids, be obedient to your husband. Those were all the things. So we when you're told that you are nothing without God from day one, and then you raise your kids to also believe that, then everything revolves around denying yourself, taking up your cross, and following Jesus. So I'm just amazed at you guys who have had autonomy for so long. I just envy you so much, because I'm so new to it, and I sometimes get very discouraged thinking, I'm too old now. I can't change my brain because it's so hard.
Never too old.
Never too old.
I think the amount of courage it takes in order to step out of that when it's all you've ever known. And I mean, I personally can't identify the level of personal risk with personal relationships and loved ones and family and your whole worldview. I mean, the amount of courage that it takes to do that. So it makes me so sad to hear, here's this woman with this amazingly powerful story who's doing something so amazing with her life and her voice, and to hear you say, I have so much self-doubt and I just don't know if I can do this. It makes me really sad to hear that, because because I can't even imagine the amount of strength it takes to do what you're doing.
Absolutely. So I have a little something I just saw, I think was last night, Wendy, that I think will make you feel a little bit better about that. It came across my Facebook feed. I think it was a video, and it was a video of a 90-year-old Jewish woman eating bacon for the first time. And the cool part is that the fellow who did it, he did it like a mini documentary, because I think it was only like 10 minutes long, but he gets her talking about her life as a Jewish woman and, things like that. And she talks about how, how she's not now, she said she was agnostic, I think, but she was not, in her late 80s, figuring out that, hey, that God shit's not all it's cracked up to be. So there's never too old. And she was quite the fun, he had her laying on a couch, almost like she was talking to her shrink. And at the end, he's like, so how was the bacon? She's like, oh, it was a pretty good breakfast.
What was really key in that video, though, she goes, I go from this little old Jewish woman to reading Christopher. She discovers the internet and discovers Google, and that other people had the exact same questions as she did, which amazed her. And she discovered Christopher Hitchens.
Yep.
That's good. I thought that was really fun.
It's like,
but yeah,
Jewish great grandmother going on about Christopher Hitchens. I was like, oh my, this is awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But then that's the thing. I mean, it's like, I was in my mid-30s when I finally was able to admit to myself that I was an atheist, and it took another year or two to be able to say it, public. And it would be, well, I don't believe in that. And finally, it took another few years where I finally said, well, I don't believe in God. And the next step was, I'm an atheist. Now I don't shut up. It's like, it's steps, and coming from that deep of an indoctrination, I mean, some people, I think I know one person who has blasted out of evangelical fundamentalists right into atheism, like, I mean, head over heels, and didn't have any issues. But most of the people that I know fall into your category, Wendy, where it's kind of, it's a process, and it's a process, hopefully, where, you know, you'll get stronger. And the more, I think you like with your podcast, I think will help in that, because you're going to get exposed to all different views, and there's quite a few out there.
Yeah.
So, and welcome to the fold of women podcasting.
Yes.
I think too, I think it's really, it's worth noting that, you know, I made a comment earlier about how, you know, you've gone from a community with no real women role models into another community with no real women role models, and you're giving other women a role model.
Thank you, Tracy.
I think that's a really powerful. I'm gonna get all choked up.
Well, you got me choked up. I had to get some Kleenex.
I'm dabbing my eye here.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, for what it's worth, you know, my journey has been different than yours, obviously, but you're being that role model. You're giving some other woman out there something that you didn't have, and I think that's really valuable.
Thank you, Tracy. That really means a lot. Yeah, I got a little bit choked up there, because what you said is so foreign to what I've been hearing for 7 years, where, you know, all my previous friends, once they hear that I'm not in church anymore, they want nothing to do with me. It's just silence or it's hostility. And I've lost, you know, all my in-laws from my first marriage, which was, you know, 30 some people. And, you know, about 90% of my friends, hundreds and hundreds of people that I knew, and I can't contact them anymore. I have nothing in common with them. I don't know if it's estrangement as much as it is shunning on their part. And so I've felt like I'm a nobody, even more so, you know, since leaving. And so for you to say I have courage, you know, that's about the opposite thing that I've been feeling. Because I didn't, you know, when I started questioning my faith, I didn't go about it saying, oh yeah, I'm very courageous and this is what it's going to be like. I had no idea the fallout. And there's some days that I wish I could go back, you know, just so that I would have all my friends and family back again. And that and you can't, you know, once you open that door of doubt, you can't ever go back to living in a myth. So it's very encouraging. I really appreciate what you've said, and it's new to hear that.
Another little bit of encouragement might be. When I left, I as far as family, I didn't have so much an issue. We were already estranged anyways, but I lost a lot of my college friends. And just recently, I've gained a lot of my college friends back.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's neat.
That's awesome.
It took 30 years, and some of them are atheists now, but it goes, you know, I mean, for me, I'm a loner as it is, so for me, okay, you know, for other people, they can't do that. I can compartmentalize it very, very well. Choice of being bipolar. But I do understand what you're saying, but I think eventually it's such a shock. I mean, people look at, oh, I'm an atheist or I'm an agnostic or however you want to define yourself, and they're like shocked. And, you know, it's just like late night. John Oliver did a bit the other night on Alex Jones, and in that, Jones made a comment about, oh, I'm dressed, you know, so I can infiltrate the Satanists, you know, yada, yada, yada. And John Oliver, and the funny thing is that I didn't catch it until after I was done watching it. I'm thinking, John Oliver kind of went along with that stereotype. And it wasn't even maybe an hour later, and that's the thing, we get stuck up in these stereotypes. So I'm Magus Peter Gilmore from the Church of Satan put out a bit, and so did Lucian Greaves from Satanic Temple, saying, you know, getting on Oliver for accepting that stereotype that, you know, you would have to be a Satanist to appreciate the shooting at Sandy Hook. And so I'm curious to see if John Oliver learns from that and realizes he did a faux pas. When people get into the stereotype about us being atheists, I mean, we've all heard all the stereotypes. Oh, you know, you worship Satan is my favorite one.
You
like,
just sin.
Yeah, you just want to sin. You have no morals. All this other book. I mean, we all hear it, and it's like when they realize that we're not like that, or that it isn't even, you know, is a total straw man. They slowly kind of drift back. In some cases, very slowly, but yes.
You know, my first husband. This is something you said just made me think of this. My first husband was physically and verbally abusive, and that was over a long time ago. And it took me a long time to be able to even identify it as abuse, and then it took a, you know, it was just a healing process, so, you know, gradual. And then I got to a point where I could talk about it pretty openly, which I do now. And people would say, wow, you know, that was really, you were so brave to leave. And I don't know, maybe your experience is similar, is that I had to say, it wasn't like I had this epiphany that, hey, you know what, I deserve better than this. I don't deserve to be treated this way. Screw this, I'm leaving. It wasn't that. It was just survival. It was like, I can stay and die, or I can leave and live. And it was just survival. It wasn't like I had this grand, I am better than this, I am woman, hear me roar, watch me reclaim my power. It wasn't that. And even now in retrospect, I can't really see it in those terms. But I don't know if maybe that's sort of a similar, you know, if that translates at all to what your experience was. Is that, you know, you said you don't feel like you're showing any courage. That's not what it felt like for me either. I didn't feel like courage. It just felt like survival. Like, this is what I have to do in order to live and be able to live with myself.
Yeah. Well, when I was leaving my first marriage, I had a glimpse into the future, because my mom was very instrumental in making me stay with my first marriage, even though it wasn't a good marriage for the last 8 years, especially. And so when I went and visited my parents, and I was witnessing what I would look like in 20 years with my husband if I'd stayed, and I realized I didn't want that. I didn't want that for my future, because my mom, you know, it was an abusive relationship, but she stayed because she was a Christian, and she had a Bible verse for everything. You know, if the non-believing husband wants to stay, then the believing wife has to stay, and all of these verses. And she was my mentor. I never challenged her. I never disobeyed her. And so I just kept doing, you know, following in her footsteps. And then there was just a few seeds of doubts, and after getting my heart broken twice by my first husband, of him being unfaithful, I realized it was going to happen again and again if I didn't do something. And then to watch my mom and realize, well, in 20 more years, that's what I'm going to look like. And it was like the ball dropped, and I realized I have to get out of this marriage for my own sanity. Yeah, it wasn't courage. It was, survival.
I mean, it was sanity. Courage, but that's not what it feels like.
No,
it feels like survival.
Yeah, and I also wanted my girls, to not see, you know, that this is what they have to expect in a marriage too. You know, it was for survival for myself and also for my 3 kids, especially my 2 girls, so that they wouldn't repeat that. But unfortunately, you know, they saw it for long enough, and they've had challenges with their own boyfriends, because they saw, you know, me demonstrating being with a man that did not treat them correctly and did not treat them with respect. So they've had to learn you know, from scratch, because they sure didn't have a good example from me. They're getting a better example now with my second husband, their stepdad, because he's incredibly caring and very, very, you know, very respectful of everybody, whether you're a man or a woman. And so, but it's sad to see, you know, I wish I'd left earlier, left the marriage earlier. And I wish that other women would realize that there is something so much better out there. Even though divorce is incredibly difficult, I've never heard anybody say divorce is easy, but life on the other side is so much better. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a question from the chat for Tracy, actually. A fellow Booleanator who actually got to meet last night. He's actually a nice fella. But he is curious in regards to you saying that you wouldn't go on a speaking tour and leave your daughter. He said, is it a fear of your husband's inability, the backlash of others, or a lack of support from your husband, or just over that backlash? He's trying to sort of suss out what you're...
Yeah, it's none of those. It's really none of those. I mean, overtly, I can't speak to how much of the societal, you know, I would feel bad about society's judgment. It's more that I don't want to be away from my daughter for 4 months. I don't want to be away from her. I don't want to miss. I mean, I only have the one, and I had her late in life. And this is it. This is my one shot at seeing this kid grow up, and so I just don't want to miss it. I just wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't go unless she could come with me.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I think he was just trying to sort of figure out what your motivation for that choice would be.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I suppose, you know, my husband would figure it out. He'd have to.
Yeah.
In other words, being a mom is more important than doing, you know, you don't necessarily have the backlash type worries. It's just you want to be a mom.
Yeah, and you know, I had a career. You know, I had all that. I was 35 when I married my second husband. I was 38 when my daughter was born. So I had a career, and you know, I did my partying, and I did my whoring, I did all of that stuff, and I don't need to do any. I don't feel a need to do that anymore. You know, I have a book in me, and I will do that, and I do what I can with, you know, my page and my blog, and right now, you know, it's 100% her. And I've had people say, oh, you're too wrapped up in your kid, you know, she's going to go off to, you know, she's going to grow up and leave you someday, and you're going to be bereft. And I say, and I will have earned it. That is my prerogative as a mother, to be bereft. If I have empty nest syndrome that kills me, I will have earned it. So that's what I'm going for, man.
In answer to your question you post on Facebook, go for it.
Yeah, like I said, it's like rolling around in there like a BB in a tuna fish can. So I don't know. I'm not making any commitment yet, but it's yeah.
Okay.
Getting the
you have to
just. I say that, one, because you won't know until you try it, and two, going along with the whole notion of getting more voices out there, and specifically more women's voices.
Yeah.
Is, to me, is one of, I mean, that's one of the main reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. Thankfully, Deb has in the beginning, we had basically the identical thoughts of, we got to get more women voices within the community. So, and luckily she's much more vocal than I am. I'm a little bit more reserved in what I say, unless she hit one or two specific topics, then you won't shut me up. But yeah, I mean, I you know, the more voices, the better. you know, and whether we agree or disagree, that really isn't the point. But more ideas have to be put forth in order for us to make the choices that we're presented with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have this sort of dream, again, rolling around in my head like a BB in a tuna fish can, of, you know, creating some sort of foundation, you know, like the Center for Inquiry, which I'm not using that as a role model, but, you know, like a foundation that would be specifically to elevate women's voices in the secular movement. But I don't have the first clue what that would look like or what would be involved. I've thought about looking around and seeing, you know, like, what I have to write bylaws and have a board and, you know, raise money and what would that look like. But, you know, it may be something that starts as just like a Facebook group and then build from there. But I you know, I've been sort of hovering around this. What is it I need to be doing here? And that feels like something that there's a real need for. So
yes, I'm totally on board with that, Tracy. When I first started the podcast, I had no idea. I didn't know who Karen Garst was, and when I put out a vote for what the name of the podcast should be, there was about 12 names, and it got narrowed down to Women Beyond Belief. And then I found out that somebody had a book named Karen Garst. She had a book with that name. So I got in touch with her and I said, I don't want to steal your name, but if it's possible, can I use that for my podcast? And she said, oh, this would be great. We can collaborate. And so we've been doing more collaboration. And I mean, I have ideas of, you know, doing women's conferences, international women's conferences, retreats. And yes, it could all be under a non-denominational company or a foundation or something like that. But I wish I could dedicate 100% of my time to this, because I would love to get on board with that kind of a thing. I really see a need for it. But I have a job and I've got kids at home, and that's the thing. I just don't have enough time in my day to dedicate to it.
But talking about it, you're putting the idea out there and planting the seed in somebody younger than us.
Yeah, or has lots of more time. Yeah.
Once they're done with
what
law
about all
school,
that time you have, Morgan?
Yeah,
that's right.
I know. Right?
You're the young one here.
Once she's done with law school, and
you can be our legal counsel.
there you go.
Yeah, I could.
The ideas that we might present as dreams might spark something in somebody of Morgan's age. I know Morgan wouldn't possibly be able to do anything now. She's got her head wrapped around law school stuff. But I think that's why I'm not afraid to say, well, I would like to do this or I'd like to do that, but I'm getting old and I physically can't do it anymore, or yada, 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 or whatever excuse I come up with, or, you know. But I think it plants that seed. So, you know, someone might, you know, younger generation might get that idea and say, hey.
Not even necessarily a younger person, but a group of us, right?
Yeah.
So if you are talking about it and people are listening, if you know, find some time to hit a meetup here and there, you know, if we actually met at Imagine a Religion, so you luckily you had the time to get out to do that, and just talking about it, you know, and maybe
that's how our podcast started.
Exactly. So like if enough of you, if you get the idea out to enough people, you may have folks coming around and say, hey, I like that idea. What can I help? Is there something? My camera's all weird. You know, can I get my friends involved, or, you know, who knows what can happen. So
well, I have experience.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be more women-friendly spaces at these conferences too. And I've noticed that something I haven't seen before is, I know that QED, which is a conference in Manchester, England, they're actually having childcare available. so that
That's
more
good.
women can attend the
Awesome.
conference, and so that more
Yeah.
families can attend the conference. And I would love to see a foundation that's encouraging this kind of thing and having conferences where the space is available.
Yeah.
Great.
Because
I
I
do
think
know
that would
there's a
be
few in the States that do that, and I can't think of any titles off the top of my head, but I know when I was filling out my wish list of conferences I would at least like to hit once in my lifetime, some of them did have childcare available for families, and I thought that was kind of cool.
So you were trying to say something there, Wendy.
No, I was just saying I have, I mean, that's one thing I can look back on being in the church and being a missionary for 15 years. I've gotten a lot of skills, you know, in terms of traveling and itinerating, and, you know, we had to set up cross-country furloughs, speaking at conferences, and so I have experience in that, and it's just all going to waste. I mean, there's nothing I can do with it now that I'm out of the church. I can't organize anything really, or I mean, I don't. It's not as easy to facilitate that when you aren't in a church of 200 people every Sunday morning, and so it's, you know, it's everything's from the grassroots up. So yeah, and this is very, very new to me in terms of I sort of came out as an atheist in 2014, and then I made a whole pile of enemies, including my mother-in-law, and so I shut up for another couple of years, and so I'm just starting, like, literally in the since I joined the Clergy Project, which was in the fall of 2016, I've just started to find people like you and friends on Facebook. And so I'm still very, very new to atheism in that way, and to meeting people who are like-minded. And it's just like the world is opening up to me. So I would love to become a part of that. I do think that it doesn't matter the age. I think it's the amount of time people have. Like Karen Garst is in her 60s. She's retired. And she's traveling all over the place on her book tour. And so I think it's the amount of time that people have and that they can dedicate to, you know, whatever cause it is. But I'd love to either dedicate that time myself or help other people to create a women's foundation, whether it's under the umbrella of Women Beyond Belief or some other name. I'd love for there to be like 10 more podcasts hosted by women, you know, like just multiply our efforts as much as we can. So, because I think a lot of people who leave the church have skills, because you learn skills being in that church, in that community environment, that are transferable to secular life. But it's, you know, how on earth can we use those skills that people have learned? So.
Absolutely. And the worst part about that is, you know, stuff I learned when in church doesn't come with a piece of paper that says I know how to do this.
Yes.
So it's tough to, you know, you really have to be able to demonstrate, you know, look, I have this skill. Here's me, you know, exhibiting me with the skill. Because if you say, well, you know, I learned how to do project management when I was in church, they'll be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Go to project management, you know, curriculum and come back and then talk.
Yeah.
You know.
No, that's true.
But those skills are real and they are absolutely valuable for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, as you're sort of finding your footing and feeling things out and sort of engaging more, I think hopefully you can find more folks around. Like I have a couple of badass ladies in my local group that I just love, and they are both in their 70s.
Okay.
And they're amazing. Like my friend Roz, she's, I don't remember exactly what part of 70. She just had a birthday lately, but she and her husband right now are on a motorcycle trip in Nova Scotia. And
wow.
She rides a Spider, which is one of the, it's 2 wheels in the front contraptions, because she's got a bad knee and she needs to have knee replacement soon, and she can't hold up a full bike, but she's bloody well out there with her biker jacket, and her husband's got a Harley, and it's amazing. And then, you know, the other lady in our group, if you think of you know, Looney Tunes granny, but in pants. That's, you know, she's that stereotypical sweet little old lady with a cane, and you don't want to find out what she'll do with that cane if you piss her off. Because she's amazing. And these are women now. Roz was raised atheist. The other lady was not. And, you know, they are two badass ladies that I would never want to piss off. And it's amazing. I love it. And I mean, you know, now granted I'm child free, so I can get out more, and I try to hit meetups and whatnot. And I'm always interested in meeting, you know, new women that are going on this journey and figuring out, you know, where they should be and what they want to do. And I can't get enough of it. I mean, I love the guys too, but I'm more excited when I find another secular woman, you know. I'm used to going to a meetup and, you know, oh, let's go out for dinner and it's me and 10 guys, you know. I'm so used to that. And I'm not bothered by that, but it would be really cool to have more women there, you know.
Yeah, I've been part of a few WebEx and conference calls with the Clergy Project and also with the Everyone's Agnostic Facebook group, and it's always me and the men. Like, where are the other women? Aren't they coming on? And I actually have a Facebook group too, and it's really hard. I think that is part of it, is just the amount of time that women have is dedicated to their family more. And maybe another reason too is, in general, religious people have more kids. I don't know if that's a statistic, but then when the religious woman leaves the church, she's got all these kids, whereas the secular women. So I think it's people that maybe the movement can be publicized more by people who either don't have kids, women who don't have kids, and or have fewer kids, and or left religion earlier, so you have a little bit more of a support base and a network, you know, like you, Deb, because like I say, I've just barely getting to know people. I can only, you know, name 5 or 10 people that I've actually met personally that are atheists, so it's like I have a long ways to go, whereas those of you who have already been out of religion for a long time, or who never were in religion like you, Tracy, then you've got a bigger network and maybe have the opportunity to, I don't know, become more public in that way.
Well, that's why I like to get out to as many meetups and groups as I can, because I can. And I know there are a lot of people that can't. And that's why I'm a mouthy whatever. Because, you know, there are people that can't do that. And, and not just because they're women, but because, you know, maybe they haven't told their extended family and there might be issues, or, you know, they might lose their jobs or whatever. And so I don't have any of those constraints. So I figure be as loud and noticeable as I can be, because, you know, there's so many people who can't for a lot of reasons.
Well, and I wonder. I know. Go ahead, Morgan.
Well, I was going to say, I wonder if part of it is economic independence as well. That with, you know, with many women, especially that come from fundamentalist homes, you know, the man makes all the money. And if you decide you're going to leave religion, you know, he might very well just kick you out on your ass.
Yep.
And so, you know, what then? And then especially...
Sorry, what?
Yeah, and especially if, you know, say even if your husband is accepting of it, he probably isn't going to be like, oh, yeah, sure, go to this big atheist conference, go speak, you know, all this other stuff. So
I'll look after the kids so you can go be more atheist-y, like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. And I think, again, it comes back to those traditional roles of, you know, men making more money and things like that, and issues of economic independence. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a big factor, too, that we need to look at.
Beth, you were saying?
I was going to say that's the issue that Vicki Garrison went through when she started no longer quivering. When she finally left, she was on her own, literally. And like a lot of women, I think as Morgan said, they don't have the finances to support going out. Like for my part, I literally, you guys have heard me say it, I literally live in buttfuck nowhere, and Deb can attest to that. I mean, there's nothing here where I live. But part of my problem is that I don't drive anymore.
Yeah.
So, not that I could afford to anymore. I mean, then there's other issues. But I think, that's why, I mean, so many people, I've heard some within the community say, well, you're not really a warrior. All you do is type at a keyboard. Fuck, go out and do things because of where I live and for other reasons. So I try to do what I can do from my computer. And I think, one of the is talking about ideas, Tracy, that I have rolling in my head. I mean, I know there have been attempts of doing online conferences. Well, that's something I'm mulling around in my head to see how maybe, together, because there are a lot within our community that are homebound for whatever reasons, whether it's financial, having children, whatever, and I think they would benefit from it. And I think, something the Reich has thoroughly embraced. When the internet became the internet that we know, they embraced it and ran with it. That are secular, that are LGBT. Now, the LGBT community does a pretty decent job. Those on the left have not. We have not embraced the power of what the internet can really do. The right, on the other hand, has. And they have run with it. And we're just now slowly starting to catch up. 10 years behind.
This may be apropos of nothing, but since it's in my head, if I don't, it'll be gone. I also think that in terms of elevating women in the secular community, it would be a mistake to just sort of try to do exactly what the men folk have been doing, like, well, we need our own Richard Dawkins, and we need our own Sam Harris, and we need our own Center for Inquiry, and we don't necessarily need that. I think, there are so many different needs that need, to be met within the community of women who are leaving religion, who have never had religion. I think there's a real need for support for women who are leaving fundamentalist religion. There's a need for women who want to leave fundamentalist religion and maybe they can't because they're being emotionally and financially blackmailed, which doesn't sound like it's that far outside the realm of possibility. You'll never see your 7 children again, or he'll throw me out and the 7 children, and I've never had a job in my life, so how am I supposed to pay the bills with 7 children? So I think that there's a need for that, and I just think there needs to be not just a replication of what already exists, but a responsiveness to what women might want to see and what women need as they're transitioning out of religion, or as they're trying to get more involved in promoting secularism or science education, or any of those things. So I think that there's a whole slew of unmet needs out there that are unique to women.
I just got an email, actually I haven't finished reading it, from a lady, and she said she was crying when she was listening to my podcast about secular parenting. I had a women's panel with 3 of my former guests, and we just talked about what it was like to be raising our kids as secular parents after we had started out raising them in the church, and I realized after I was listening to it, I thought I needed this so bad 7 years ago, And that's, you know, because a lot of the child rearing ends up on the shoulders of the women, as we've talked about. And so, yes, it's education, it's science education, like you mentioned, Tracy. And for me, I'm binge listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos and trying to educate myself and unbrainwash myself from all of that Bible stuff that I'd, you know, been indoctrinated with, and just educating myself in, you know, politics and what's the latest thing on TV and all of these things that were, you know, of the world that we weren't allowed to learn about. So yeah, education is a great thing for the women who are leaving religion, and to not feel belittled, because I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't feel ignorant and stupid for stupid questions that I ask that people my own age should know by now, but I don't. You know, I was so isolated. We didn't have TV when I was growing up, and we weren't allowed to read novels, and it was just so isolated. And there's, you know, a whole bunch more people like that are leaving the church now. So it would be good to have maybe a I don't know, online conference in that way, where we could start to ask people, you know, what would be helpful. But, you know, it's also true that I don't know what I need. You know, I don't even know the question to ask until after I've found it out.
Off the top of my head is like, even, and you could do this online or in person, but I know when I went to NanoCon, one of the things that they do is halfway through the day, instead of it just being speakers all day, they broke it up in the afternoon, and they had like little workshops for like an hour and a half or 2 hours or something. And I'm thinking, you know, you could have somebody do basic life skills for ex-fundamentalists workshop, you know, and it wouldn't even have to be gendered. It could be anybody who is coming out of a fundamentalist background, you know, who feels like they could use a brush up on basic life skills and teach you things like, you know, here's some ways you can get your taxes done, and here's how to do a job application, and, you know, here are, you know, basic education milestones that you should probably get to have a job, and, you know, just different things like that about how to balance a bank account, you know, things that people, and largely women who come out of a fundamentalist background, wouldn't know, because they're supposed to depend on a man for that shit.
Yeah, and that's very good.
As Booleanator said, the codependence issue is a big thing with fundamentalists. They want you to remain codependent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even just
part of it
like that, or you know, a workshop on, I don't know, like you say, basic stuff about childcare or child rearing as a secular person, and have a secular parent come in and say, here's what I've had to deal with. Here's some things I found that worked. Here are some things that have been, you know, I found that didn't work, and, you know, have that discussion with people that are new.
Yeah. Like, you know, helicopter parenting, we didn't call it that, but that was the biblical way to be a parent, you know, that you control your kids, that you basically are in charge of their outcome. And so everything that you do really needs to be geared to, you know, how you're going to raise your kids, and they better be good Christians at the end of the day. And so to not be a helicopter parent, you could have a workshop on how to stop becoming a helicopter parent.
I would have to take that class.
And also,
I'm a total helicopter parent.
And also, you know, like, I've got this, I started a secret Facebook group for women that have left religion, and we've got about 50, 60 members now. And one of the email threads, well, no, I think it's actually on one of the other Facebook groups I'm part of, and it was talking about how to teach your daughters, you know, what to wear, and are they, you know, should they wear short skirts and should they wear bikinis and things like that. And it was a discussion, you know, and most of the people talking about it had been in religion and had, you know, been told to cover up for modesty's sake, you know. And I put my 2 cents in and I said, you know, well, I didn't have very good training. It was, you know, if in doubt, cover up. And so that's actually not a good, well-rounded way of teaching your daughters how to dress. And so I took away all the rules in 2010 or 2009 as I was starting to leave the church. I was such a rule-oriented woman before that, and I just took all the rules away because I didn't know how to how to parent without being a very strict parent. And so I went the other way. I went far the other direction and took all the rules away. But my daughters have had to learn on their own because I still dress very conservatively. I still dress very modestly because that's what it was so, you know, drilled into me. So my daughters, I try and encourage them to dress how they want to dress and how they feel right with themselves. I want them to make that decision instead of me as a parent dictating it, because otherwise when they're out from under my roof, they won't be able to think for themselves. Like myself, I can't think for myself. So I'm just on default, dress modestly. That's the default mode. I can't really get past that in my own brain and accept my body for, you know, the way it is, because I was so used to this modesty issue. So my daughter, who goes to university in Toronto, there's a lot of Muslims in her school and people from, you know, other cultures, and she gets slut shamed if she wears a, you know, too short a skirt. So she has to face it herself. She has to make the decision, you know, am I willing to face that today, you know? And my other daughter, you know, they get whistled at the bus stop, you know, and my stepdaughter too, if they, you know, dress a certain way, they face the consequences in the real world. And to try to protect girls by making them cover up all the time, that's not actually the real world. And then when they actually maybe want to start dressing a certain way, then like, I'm so scared of even walking on a path by myself, because that's the way we were taught, you know, you cover up, men are bad. Your body is, you know, just a target. And I still have these mental blocks that are really hard to get past. So at least my girls, you know, as long as they can feel free in their own bodies and realize that their bodies aren't bad, you know, their bodies aren't sinful. So it's those types of things that I think are helpful for women who are leaving religion to get freedom around, you know.
Yeah, I struggled with the same thing. When I was leaving, go ahead, Beth.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sometimes Google is a pain. Are you familiar, any of you, with Marlene Winell?
Yes.
She wrote a book called Leave. Okay, I was going to suggest, if you're not, might want to look into her stuff. She's the author, for those that don't know, of Leaving the Fold, a guide for former fundamentalists and others leaving their religion. And she basically coined the term religious trauma syndrome. What you described, and well, all of us to a certain degree, is that religious trauma syndrome, the indoctrination that was drilled into us as children and young adults, you know, and how to break that. It's something that, you know, we have to learn to break that idea, that notion. I mean, is it wrong to be that way? No. But for some, it does cause consternation. You know, it just popped into my head.
Yeah, no, I've heard a few of her, I've heard a few podcasts with her, and she's, every time I hear her, I learn so much from her. I sent her an email and wanted her to be on my podcast, but she's pretty busy, so.
Yeah, she's really hard to get.
Yeah.
I've been trying for 2.5 years.
Oh, okay. I won't hold my breath.
I think your podcast would actually, and I'm not dishing us, but would actually be a better fit for her and what she does than so much for us. I mean, we kind of hit everything and everything, whereas you're geared towards, you know, what you're gears towards. You might have better luck getting her than I, but not that that's, you know, a bad thing. But
Yeah,
and that's what I like about about your podcast is that you know, and just like with Karen's book, is you're bringing these stories that people are so quick to dismiss. And it's like, oh, you know, for me, a lot of what I hear with a lot of what I cover is, oh, that's just fringe. Yeah, well, fringe is sitting in the Oval Office right now.
exactly.
So no, it's not. You know, it's like, so, you know, people have to be aware that these types of situations are occurring. I mean, people are shocked to find out that female genital mutilation is occurring in this country.
Oh yeah. Well, I was
I mean,
talking
it's like,
about that last night, that we were talking about how fundamentalists tend to feel that their religious quote laws supersede the laws of wherever they happen to be living, if it's not, you know, a country that's the same religion, and that they will form, you know, the community will hide those things happening because they believe it, their morality says it's okay, and they believe that our morality is different. So yeah, that shit happens everywhere.
Yeah,
I did
and it's
a
not
series. Go ahead, Morgan.
Oh, well, I was going to say, going back to the body thing, it was, especially with me at that evangelical boarding school, it was like hammered into my head, you know, basically if a boy sees my kneecap, then he'll lust for me and he'll go to hell. So, you know, it's a terrifying thing. And so, but with me, I'm curvier. And so I was told basically that the very essence of my body was sinful. And so it wasn't just, oh, that skirt is too short. It's if we can tell you have a shape, then that is sinful.
Yes.
I remember they made me wear a sweater, and I remember I got like a medium-sized sweater, and they told me it was too small because it fit me, and they made me get an extra large, and the sweater, I swear, the sleeves were like this long off of my hand, and it was below my knees, and it was the baggiest thing, but I had to wear that because I was told my body's sinful, essentially, and you know, that still sticks with me because when I was leaving work, I work for the National Sea Grant at the University of Mississippi, their office there. And so I was leaving, and I remember this some frat boy rolled his window and yelled a bunch of awful, hateful, vulgar shit at me. And I started, the first thought that popped in my head was, oh, it's because of what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
And then I realized it didn't matter what I was wearing, because I just came from work. You know, I'm wearing like a sweater on top of like a dress that goes below my kneecaps. So it literally doesn't matter what you wear. You know, these people are still going to harass women no matter what, because they can and because they enjoy scaring women. And, you know, it just shows how much that religious trauma just played into that, because I was still having those thoughts immediately. And then it took me about a minute to think about it and being like, no, I could have been.
Nope, she froze.
Uh-oh.
Naked. Yeah, it processed and slapped the company.
She could have been naked, yeah.
I did a series, Godless Mama, and I probably published about 30, but called Survivor Stories, where I solicited people to tell me their, you know, things that, you know, their survival, their religious trauma stories. And some of them are just beyond horrifying. They're just beyond horrifying. So I think, and because of my own experience and because of some other experiences of people close to me, I've had to learn about trauma, more about trauma than I ever wanted to learn. And trauma is really a very specific thing that tends to get overlooked a lot, you know, in discussions of mental illness. People talk about, you know, depression and anxiety and other things, but trauma is a very specific thing, you know, like any other mental illness. And so I think there, you know, I would hope that there are resources, you know, that maybe Freedom from Religion Foundation or that other resources, you know, provide help or guidance to people who have experienced this, because there's no doubt that a lot of these experiences really do qualify as trauma. And the other thing that leaps out at me is, again, perhaps apropos of nothing, but in all, you know, the discussions, like even just Morgan's story about, you know, your body is sinful and you need to be wearing a bag, you know, in order to hide it because otherwise men will lust. I mean, there's so much polarization now where people want to talk so much about Islam and how Islam treats women. But when I hear stories of ex-Muslims and you know, dress codes for Muslim women, it's the escape stories and the survivor stories and the misogyny stories are so similar. You know, I've heard so many from women who have left Islam and from women who have left Christianity, that I think there is some value somehow in, you know, that we tend to segregate, like there's the ex-Muslim community is this separate thing apart from the atheist community. We've sort of carved out a niche for that. But from somebody sitting on the sidelines listening to all of these stories, they're so remarkably similar. If somebody didn't say, I left fundamentalist Christianity, you wouldn't know. Yes. You know, with a huge percentage of these, the vast majority of them, you wouldn't know what religion they left. Because the stories are so similar. You know, it's body shaming and it's, you know, sex shaming and it's women are supposed to do this and it's you put aside everything that you want and all your earthly desires to do what God tells you to do. And I think there are missed opportunities when we say these are the ex-Christians and these are the ex-Muslims, because I think there's so much that people across that aisle can learn from each other and see those similarities and help each other heal. I'm not convinced that an ex-Muslim woman needs to talk to another ex-Muslim woman specifically to get that feeling of empathy and support.
That's very good, Tracy, what you said. And it ties into my interview I had with Sarah Hayter and my daughter, my 22-year-old daughter, who's also named Sarah. She co-hosted it with me. And that was exactly the type of topic that we were talking about on that podcast, where the ex-Muslims and the ex-Christians have a lot in common, and the female ex-Muslims and the female ex-Christians have a lot in common. And Sarah Hayter shared the meme that my daughter made for it. And I was reading some of the comments, and they were from ex-Christians saying, you know, this is good. Finally, ex-Muslims can see that we actually have these things in common. And when I was doing the interview, I tried to let my daughter speak the most because she has interaction with Muslims at the university she's at. And so she has a lot more background. I'm incredibly naive myself because I was so isolated in the church to interact with other religions. But when we were talking, I was thinking, what's the most extreme Christian example of clothing? And right away I thought of the Amish, and it's as if there was a country where all of the women had to dress like Amish women, and then nowadays where people have to put the burqa on in order to show solidarity, it's like women having to wear the dress of the Amish, you know, dress up like Amish women in order to show solidarity, which just doesn't make any sense. Like, that's just crazy. And yet we were being bombarded with that in the media that thinks that that's normal, that we should actually be in solidarity, when it's actually incredibly degrading of women to have to dress anything differently than men. To me, I come right down to the bare bones. If a man can wear it, the woman should be able to wear it. If the men want the women to wear a head covering, the men should have to wear the head covering. Why do we have to say that there's a difference, because really that is the ultimate of humanism and equality.
That's exactly right. And if they're saying that, men can go even topless, which is, you probably, well, I don't know if you're aware, it's legal for us to go topless.
I would never do it.
I didn't either, but you can thank a lady by the name of Gwen Jacobs for that, but it is legal. But we still don't do it because we're not comfortable with our bodies. But like, if a man can go topless, or for instance, Facebook gets a lot of grief over, well, you can post a topless man, but if you see a woman's nipples, they're going to take your picture down. Like, that's bullshit. If a man's nipples, unless he's super hairy, look exactly the same as our bloody nipples. So, if one's bad, they're either both bad or neither bad. So make up your fucking minds. But
good point,
I think it's really important in discussing, head coverings. I think it's really important for people to separate criticism of hijab with criticism of hijabis.
Yes.
Support the woman, and I will support a woman's right to choose, but I think you also have to choose to wear hijab. But there has to be acknowledgement that a lot of women don't actually choose it. They don't have the ability to choose. And also because I can't separate what it is from what it means. People say it's just a cultural expression. Yeah, it's a cultural expression of the fact that if you don't cover your hair, you're responsible for men to, you're responsible for men's physical reactions. So I think hijab is a pretty loathsome custom, but I think people really need to, and I think, ladies here, I think we do a good job of that, but not everybody does a good job of. So I think it's really important for people to separate hijab and hijabis.
Because and as my friend Elishba likes to say, and if any of you, that's Ali Rizvi's wife, she's been on the show, and if you've ever seen her posts about it, she's very against the hijab as a symbol. But she's the first one to say that, at least in this country, we're free to make decisions, even if it's a bad decision. So, if you want to wear a hijab, okay. And, I don't necessarily respect that choice, but you can do that, and that's okay. And this idea that if you see a hijabi that you should say something or do so, like, no, like, fuck off. It's like I see, Western women or mainstream women wearing stupid shit too, like painted on, lame pants or some shit to go to a bar. I'm like, okay, really? Like, I don't need to see my reflection in your ass. Like, seriously.
Well, then you wouldn't want to see my ass, Deb.
Like, you totally want to wear that to the club, okay, but can I fix my face first before you move? Thanks. But yeah, and I've caught grief from some people because when they're saying the hijab is a symbol of feminism, like, no, stop that shit right now. I will respect your choice to wear one, but don't you dare tell me it's a symbol of feminism. And I've caught grief for that before, and it's like, I don't care, because that's what it is. Drives me batty. But I have a question in the chat, and I think he said it's general, but it really kind of only applies to Wendy, because Tracy, while you have children, you were never religious, so you never left religion as a mom. But he wants to know, how have children reacted to parents coming out as atheists or having grown up indoctrinated? And he says he asked for a niece who goes to parochial school, but his sister's agnostic.
Well, based on my own experience, I left religion before my kids did. I was starting to question it and get really upset about some of the stuff that was going on in the church. So my kids followed me out of religion. They went a little bit sideways and went into, spiritual you know, spiritism and New Age and woo-woo stuff. Yeah. But they're all atheists now. This is 7 years since we left. And so for other people that I've interviewed and talked to, it does seem, especially this one fellow I know, that he was a pastor and he raised his kids in the church, and they were adults with their own children when he left the church. And then he wasn't allowed to see the grandkids, because they were afraid. You know, he really did a good job of indoctrinating his kids in the church, because he wasn't allowed to see his own grandkids after he left the church. So I don't know how, you know, what advice. I guess there is one lady I interviewed, and her husband is still religious, and they still send their kids to a Christian school, even though she is a non-believer. And she's just sort of playing it safe, I think, because at this point in time, it's not worth it. You know, you have to pick your battles. And the Christian school is fairly, you know, is a pretty good school. There's other people who I think maybe, well, there was another lady who didn't want to out her kids. So they were still Christian, and she came on using a pseudonym, because she wanted them to decide on their own if they left religion themselves. For my kids and also my husband's kids, so we have 5 kids between the two of us, and his 2 kids were going to a Christian school when I moved in with him. So he was going to church, they were going to a Christian school, and he slowly stopped going to church. And so his kids slowly started to see, you know, less of their Christian friends, and then he stopped sending them to a Christian school. So they slowly just extracted themselves out of religion, and now both of them are atheists as well. So it's a lot easier. The younger they were, you know, 7 and 11, I think, at that age. So they hadn't hit that mid-teen years when it's a lot harder. Whereas my 2 older kids were 14 and 16 when they left religion. So I don't know if I'm answering the question very well.
No, that's fine.
I mean, we've had some, I don't want to say challenges, but you know, I feel like I walk a little bit of a fine line as well. You know, I live in a non-religious area, but it's a small community, and you just never know how different parents are going to react. So I've never, you know, indoctrinated my daughter into atheism. You know, I haven't, you know, told her you shouldn't believe in God. I've never told her she should or she shouldn't believe. You know, my husband believes in God. He's not a religious person, but he believes in God. He considers himself a Christian, but he hasn't been to church in the 14 years we've been together, and probably for 10 years before that anyway. So, but she knows I don't believe in God. And so once she started going to school, of course, she, you know, encounters other people and comes home and starts, you know, asking, what does this mean, or what does that mean? And we did have an incident recently where one of her friends, apparently from a very religious family, and this 8-year-old child, apparently it came up because this 8-year-old was talking a lot about Jesus and God and religion. And so my mother doesn't believe in God because it's just no big deal in our house. And this 8-year-old child saw fit to announce to me that if I didn't get a Catholic Bible and start believing in God, that I was going to hell. Mm-hmm. And which is quite precocious, I would say, for somebody to tell their friend's parents in their own house. Yeah. And I said, no, thank you. And then she said, you're the devil. And told my daughter that I was going to hell. And so we had to have some conversations about that. And my daughter said, you know, you're not a bad person, Mom. I know you're not a bad person. You're a good person. And so I believe in God, but I don't believe in hell. I don't believe in the devil. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I try not to talk too much about it unless she asks me questions. Mm-hmm. She's very smart, and she's likes science, and she's been through a lot of stuff, more stuff than she should have been through for her age. So she has got a wicked bullshit radar. And so I try not to sweat it too much when she says, I believe in this or I believe in that, when I know it's complete nonsense. Because I think she hasn't even turned 9 yet. She'll figure these things out, you know, in good time. So, but it is a challenge because I don't want to tell her, don't believe this.
Yeah,
so I try to talk about what there is evidence for, and
I think, but I'm not, and I may be wrong. I think Dan Arel of Danthropology, he has a book out on secular parenting that might be a resource. I have never read it. I'm a step parent, and my stepchildren are well into their 30s now. But also, too, this issue of, you know, children and religion is becoming even more of a problem if you consider the whole tactic of the good news clubs, and Dan Courtney does a lot of writing on them, is basically they want to proselytize to the children, so the children proselytize to the parent. And this, what you went through, Tracy, with your daughter's friend, is not unusual in the Good News Club.
And the kids that I went to school with that I ended up joining their sect, they, like my mom was sort of religious. We went to church more when I was a kid because she was taught that that's how you teach kids how to be good people. You make them go to church. So that's what we did. But that girl, I in retrospect now, I can tell that she was taught to evangelize to her friends to get us to go, because they had a thing, it was called Kids Club, and it was like Sunday school, but it was on like a Wednesday or a Thursday or something, but it was exactly like Sunday school. But they even went so far as to give out points to the kids in the form of Monopoly money, so that like if you memorized a verse, you'd get 5 points. And you know, if you I don't know, if you whatever else you did, but the biggest thing of all was if you brought a friend with you, you got a ton of points. And then they had all these toys and things that they bought from the dollar store, and you could buy the toys with your points, which is why it was Monopoly money. Now, when I went, I was 13, so we were like the big kids, and we didn't have like a Sunday school where you colored pictures of Bible characters. We had a quote Bible study, which was, here's what the verse means you just read. It was no study, you know. And so for us, they enticed us with, like, I was from a single parent home, so we didn't have money to go on vacations or anything. And it was, well, we're going to, if you come every week, then you can come camping with us in the summertime. And I'm like, hot damn, I can go somewhere like with kids my own age and go away. And, you know, they would take us to Toronto because we're up in, I don't know if you know where Mitchell is, Wendy, but Stratford area, the boonies, you're fucking, you know, hick kids. They would take us to Toronto, which, you know, when you're 13, that's like going to another fucking country. And they would take us to Toronto and on the subway and take us to Nathan Phillips Square skating. And it's just like, whoa, wow, this is amazing. And so, because I remember the first time I went, because I was raised in the United Church, which is very liberal, thinking, you know, and I don't even remember what it was, but it was something at one of the Bible studies that I was like, well, that's not what they teach in my church. Because to me, church was church and it was all Christian, so it was all good. And that's when I was kind of like, wait a minute, that's not what I was taught at church. But I kept going because I liked all of the fun activities and getting to go to Toronto and getting to go camping. And they would have a sports night, you know, and one of the elders had a piece of property with a bunch of land, so we could go play baseball or soccer, and, you know, we'd get, you know, snacks, and it was all just to sucker us there to, you know, get this bullshit in our heads. And I believed it for like another 4 years.
Well, it's like the group I was involved with where I ended up being a counselor at a Jesus camp. The primary organization associated with the camp was called Pioneer Girls. Basically, it was a Christian version of Girl Scouts. And I was a scout for years, all the way up to, till they found out I was gay. They threw me out.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, which is kind of odd now because they're pretty open about it, at least with the Girl Scouts and not like the Boy Scouts. But they basically enticed us through, games and snacks and camping trips, and this is how I ended up at the Jesus camp. And I ended up becoming a counselor. I went through their KILT training, camper and leadership training. And while not as extreme as the movie Jesus Camp, the same tactics were used. You proselytize to your friends. And we actually had one girl, while I was a counselor at the time, and she was Catholic. And the group that I was associated with, if you were Catholic, you were not Christian. One of the other counselors went up to this 10-year-old girl and said, "You pray to the wrong God." I'm like, oh.
Wrong Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, but this is the mentality they have. And that's why, learning, for lack of a better word, the proper way to bring up a secular child has got to be fraught with lots of challenges.
I would say, for sure. It's, in a way, it makes me glad I decided not to have kids. But, it's tough for you guys. But I think the thing is that every kid is going to react differently, and there's really, there's nothing I don't think any one parent can do to kind of, ensure the child reacts a certain way or feels a certain way about it. It's just, you got to do the best you can, I think.
Do your kids support your decision, Wendy?
Oh yeah, I have had to say over and over and over again how much I regret, being such a hard parent and being so legalistic. And so they're very, very glad that I've changed because life is a lot calmer in general. But yeah, they support me, and I've never had such a good relationship as I have with them since leaving religion. Because before that,
wonderful.
when you're a parent in the religious church, the fundamentalist evangelical church, you're told to discipline your child. You are told to spank your children or basically hit them. I'm trying to wean myself off of using the word spank, because it's actually the word hit is the word that we should use. So we were told to hit our kids. We were told to discipline them. We were told to instruct them. But you were never told to respect your children. So I did not know, I was never respected by my parents, and I was never taught to respect my children and encouraged to do that. So I had it's not a very good relationship. It's not a humanist relationship with my children before that. And so now I'm learning how to respect them as equals, equal humans, treating them as I would treat anybody else, instead of treating them as this prodigy that I had to mold and shape into a wonderful Christian. So they're very happy that I've changed. But I have a lot of regrets that I'm, asking for their forgiveness for being such a very, very legalistic mother before.
Didn't one of your daughters design your logo, if I remember?
Yes. Yeah, my 22-year-old daughter, Sarah, she designed my logo, and my 18-year-old daughter is the one who has composed all the music for it. So I'm really, really lucky that I have their skills to help me out.
And this is really cool because on your website, you kind of go explain it, and she's posed the way she's posed because it forms a W out of her sweater.
With the arms, yeah.
Oh,
I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome.
so
She has
cool.
no face because she kind of represents women everywhere, and the coffee was to kind of like, let's chill and
Yeah.
you know, relax, listen to some stuff. I just thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
So she did a great job. So and people can see that on your website, which we'll talk about in a minute or two. But I just
Okay.
thought that was really cool that
Yeah.
they helped you out with stuff. And you were saying that she was doing co-hosting on the one show as well, which is awesome.
Yeah,
So-
she was my first guest. She was my guinea pig for episode 1. And then she came on and co-hosted the one with Sarah Hayter. She and her boyfriend want to create their own podcast someday, so I'm giving her a chance to try it out, I guess.
Now you're not trying to create fundamentalist little good mini Christians. You're allowing them to become cool secular podcast people.
Yeah, well, my kids are so much smarter than I am because I didn't go to post-secondary academic education until after I was 40. So I have very smart kids, but I mean, I think they're probably as smart as anyone else. But I'm always amazed at what they're able to do and how articulate they are and how much they know, about science and evolution and that. I don't even know half the stuff that I'm still trying to learn from them.
Well, to be honest, though, I never learned evolution in school either, and it never factored into anything for me. I came to atheism through studying history. So for me, I didn't even know, like I knew there was a thing called evolution, and I kind of had an idea how it worked and whatnot. And it wasn't until I met fundamental Christians on the internet who tried to sell me intelligent design. And at this point, I'd been an atheist for 17 years. And I was like, what's this evolution crap? What intelligent design, huh? What are you talking about? Because, I mean, I've lived in a fairly secular bubble my entire life because where my family was never horribly religious. I mean, my mom's side was to some degree, but I've been mouthy since the minute I was going around, you're going to hell. And then I was like, hey, there's no God. Did you know that? So they're used to my crap, but, that I just didn't, it wasn't a thing for me. So I had never encountered these people who were like, oh, did you know that if you give teenagers birth control, you're telling them to have sex? I'm like, what the fuck planet are you on? I had never encountered these people. So yeah, I didn't know anything about evolution until I'd been an atheist for 17 years already. So I wouldn't feel too bad about that.
Yeah. No, I was very much indoctrinating my kids. I mean, I was just like a puppet in terms of regurgitating exactly what had been taught to me, because that's what the Christians do, is they just keep reproducing themselves. And when you live in that bubble, you have a very small world, and so you don't have a lot of outside influences, and so it's easy to just replicate it. So I remember taking my kids to a creation research conference when they were 9, 13, and 15, I think. And they had some explanation of why the earth was 6,000 years old and why Noah's flood was real. And I believed it all, and I was teaching my kids, and we subscribed to their magazine. And my son, actually, he read Sam Harris's book, A Letter to a Christian Nation. And so I think he started actually questioning religion, but he wasn't very outspoken about it. But I was pretty bad at indoctrinating my kids, as a good Christian mother is supposed to do.
Well, and Letter to a Christian Nation is a very good book. For in terms of science, like I would never ever try to ease somebody into atheism with, like God is not great, which is a fabulous book, or The God Delusion, which is also very good. But I would say read Freakonomics. because it's all about follow data. This is what the data tells us. And even though it's this really strange conclusion, this is what the data tells us. It's just about numbers. It's completely dispassionate and completely apolitical, but it's a really great book for, you know, the light bulbs going on for, oh, well, that's what the numbers say. So it's not right or wrong, it just is. Or something like Cosmos by Carl Sagan, which is one of the, you know, the greatest books of all time. It's my favorite book of all time. Or something like A Brief History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson, which just won some kind of award. Like, it was on that list of books that the Richard Dawkins' Selfish Gene was named as one of the most important books, science books of all time. And A Brief History of Nearly Everything is also on there. But it's a very sort of conversational overview, but a very thorough and very entertaining way of introducing things like, you know, the way the solar system works, and the way the universe works, and the way evolution works, and, you know, all of those things. So they're really good, rather than throwing at, you know, like all of these very, you know, particle physics or, you know, things like that at people. Things that are sort of conversational and interesting and amusing and poetic in a lot of ways are great introductions to those kinds of subjects.
That's good. Yeah.
Oh, ladies, my goodness, that went quickly. It's time to wrap things up. So, Wendy, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. I'm really glad that we kind of bumped into each other in the bookstore at the conference.
Yeah.
I don't even remember who I was going in to buy that time. That was it was so awesome and awful having that bookstore right there the whole time. It's like, wow, I just saw that person speak. Oh, and look, there's everything they ever wrote for sale right there. Shit. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And tell us where to find your show and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to meet some new people. And yeah, anybody who would like to visit the website, it's womenbeyondbelief.com, and Facebook page is Women Beyond Belief, and Twitter, it's WBB Podcast, and Pinterest, it's the Women Beyond Belief Podcast, Instagram, Women Beyond Belief Podcast, so I'm pretty much everywhere. And YouTube channel is Women Beyond Belief Podcast as well.
Excellent.
Just followed you on Twitter.
Great, thanks.
And Beth, where do we find you?
Easiest way is on Twitter, Dune998. That connects to both Facebook and to my blog, and I am blogging again, kind of. But that's the easiest and fastest way. And I'm also on Google, but I don't really use it that much. Just basically to annoy people.
Dude,
Bless you.
Yeah, that doesn't work, but thanks. And Morgan, where do we find you?
All right, we can find me on Facebook, Morgan L. Stringer. You can also follow me at Mostring. That's Mostring. You can also catch me on the Bi Skeptical podcast with Trav Mamone about every other week. That comes out on iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher.
Awesome. And Ms. Tracy, tell us about your blog and all of that fun stuff.
I am on Facebook as Godless Mama, and my blog is godlessmama.com. I'm on Twitter at The Godless Mama, and Morgan and I are also on Facebook as The Political Feminist.
Awesome. So, and you can also find me on Sunday mornings at 12:05 a.m. on Holy Crap, the Vlogcast, with Shuj and Tribble and our motley cast of characters, whoever shows up that particular. I didn't make it this weekend because we had a friend come into town unexpectedly that we hadn't seen in a while, so kind of had to bail, but yeah, I'm usually there. And I don't know what we're talking about this week because we never know till like a day or two before, but it's okay. It's usually something skeptic related or secular, etc. But holycrapthevlogcast.com, you can find out all about it there. And if you watch the Great Debate Community, we have a new community channel. So some of us have been, and Steve's crazy, but he gave us the ability to host hangouts over there. And I'm hoping to have one around midnight Eastern tonight as sort of the after the show kind of deal. But yeah, I might be popping up on there and other things over on the Great Debate Community. So that's always fun too. So, and before we go, of course, we always wanted to mention the folks over at the Whitefields Educational Foundation who have the Taylor Scholarship that provides counseling for people who are leaving or have left religion. I may have mentioned before, it's in Utah, so they get a higher degree of ex-Mormons, but they are willing to talk to people from any religion who want to talk to somebody. And the Taylor Scholarship provides funding for people who feel like they want to talk to somebody, but they don't have the money to pay for it. So that was started by David Michael of the My Book of Mormon podcast. So the URL is whitefieldseducational.org/My Book of Mormon podcast. They're a if you want to give to somebody, that's definitely a good place to do it. And of course, we do have a Patreon, so if you want to throw us a buck or two, that would be awesome. We use that to pay for our Spreaker hosting so that we can live stream and all of that fun stuff. And we do have we had a new patron this week. I don't know if you would want to be mentioned live on the air or not, but thank you. We really appreciate that. Every dollar helps. So,
Awesome.
yeah, that's really awesome. So we totally appreciate that. Okay, so until next week, we will leave you as always with a friend of the show, Dave Foda's Human Creed for Mankind, and we will see you here next week. Oh, and Beth, we've got a cool science lady next week. Before we go.
And I just lost her name. Hold on one minute. Oh my God, that is
yeah, it's Beth's guess.
Science is yeah. She does the Science Enthusiast podcast. I want to say her name is Natalie Newell, but I probably have gotten it so wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, so
yes.
But yes, that's our.
It's best guest, and I don't have my calendar in front of me, but
Yeah, I didn't either. For some reason mine closed.
Okay. But anyway, we'll be back talking science next week, so we'll see you then.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.